Hello, I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and welcome to In Conversation With, the podcast series that delves into the world of financial services and brings you face to face with some of the most notable figures in the industry. Listen as we discuss topics that are currently facing the industry and hear from visionary CEOs to disruptive innovators as we bring you a diverse array of voices and perspectives. We'll explore the challenges they faced, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they have to share about the ever-evolving landscape of financial services.
Hi, I'm Lois Vallely, Chief Reporter for Money Marketing, and for this episode, I am delighted to welcome back to the podcast Tom Mathar. I think I got your name right, Tom. Sorry if I didn't.
Yes.
Who heads up Aegon UK's Centre for Behavioural Research. So thank you so much for joining me again. I know we did a podcast a couple of years ago, but I always find your insights on behavior around finance and everything really interesting. So I just wanted to have another conversation with you today. So for the benefit of any listeners who maybe don't know you or didn't listen to the last podcast, could you start off just saying a little bit about yourself, what you do and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And thank you for the invitation again. It's a joy to be here. So as you said, we have at Aegon this outfit that we call the Center for Behavioral Research. And this is really a small research team of psychologists and behavioral scientists who work in the space where behavioral finance and financial well-being meet. And I guess in essence, the purpose or the mission of our center is to help people make better long-term decisions for themselves when this is something that we, and I speak of humans in general, find really hard to make long-term decisions for ourselves and good long-term decisions for ourselves. And of course, we work a lot with employers and we work a lot with advisors, financial advisors and planners, and how they can help their clients make better long-term decisions for themselves. That is something we do. We work a lot with advisors on as well. So in a nutshell, that is it.
Perfect. How did you, just out of interest, how did you get into that area in the first place? What was it that drew you to that area of financial services?
I mean, I suppose I'm a market researcher by training. That's what I did in the past before I joined Aegon in 2017. I worked agency side for market research agencies. And I suppose one of the things I found was that it was perhaps a bit of a frustration with typical surveys. When there is the underlying assumption in surveys is that if you really ask the question in a precise and grammatically correct way, then you can really work out and find out what people want and what they think and what they do, etc. Right? When, it's of course a bit more complex, right? What people think they say, what people think they say, what people actually do, all these things are very different things. And as a result, I became much more skeptical with classic market research and was drawn into behavioral research. And, that was, of course, something that was of interest at Aegon when, behavioral finance and behavioral research principles are very interesting for financial service companies. And then more recently, perhaps 4 or 5 years ago or so, of course, financial well-being came up as a subject and a topic. It became quite a hot potato. So we really were then quite interested in developing a behaviorally informed view of financial well-being. So when this was something that we felt was perhaps missing in the space, there's a lot of debate, a lot of concepts, approaches, definitions of financial well-being. We wanted to have a behaviorally informed one. So that's kind of how we landed here. Brilliant.
And so what's your behaviorally led definition of financial well-being?
Okay, well, it's a simple sounding sentence. It's all about our mental and financial ability to spend, earn, and manage money in line with what makes us happy, right? In line with what makes us happy today, tomorrow, and beyond. But so it sounds, as I say, it sounds simple, but when you unpack it, there's a lot in it, right? So it's not just about the financial side. As I said, it's about the mental ability as well. And one of the more underlying assumptions, perhaps basic premises of the work we do, is that we believe that the right financial conduct, especially long-term financial conduct, is first and foremost a mental challenge, and it's only secondly a financial challenge. Because we are not, as humans, as I said before, we are not built to be making long-term decisions for ourselves. But all these trade-offs that we've got to make nowadays between financial security now versus financial security in the future, living a happy life now and living a happy life in the future. These things are awfully complex trade-offs, but they are first and foremost, as I say, mental challenges, right? Because they require so much of our mental bandwidth, not only in terms of how we budget and how much we save and how much we save for the long term and how much we save for emergencies and insurance, all those things, but also because we require a lot of introspection to work out, well, what actually is it that makes us happy, right? What is it that gives us gratification, that gives us a sense of purpose, that makes us feel competent and useful, etc. All those things, And what are the things that are standing in the way? And so there's a lot of mental bandwidth that is required so as to live that life where we earn, spend, and manage money in line with what makes us happy. This is why it's actually it sounds simple, but it is actually awfully hard.
Yeah, lots of intricacies involved in it.
Exactly.
So I know I went to the Institute for Financial Wellbeing's conference recently in Coventry, and I saw you speak, and you did a really interesting presentation full of lots of information. And I wondered if you could just give us a bit of a flavour of some of the things you were talking about in that presentation around behaviour and finance.
Yes, sure. So it was a presentation of three parts. In the first section, I was offering a reflection on why we even speak about financial well-being. I said it before, it's become a bit of a hot potato, perhaps 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it's really a bit odd, actually, isn't it? Because when you go back, you can go back to ancient Greece or perhaps other civilized cultures at the time, and you would find that debates on how important is money for a happy life, and what's the true value of money and wealth, etc. All those discussions. It's been a really long time that we are having those debates. The Stoics, the Epicureans, the early Buddhists, all of them, they would have reflected on this. So why is it that we're speaking about this now? That was one of the first questions that I was asking. And I think the answer in a nutshell is because we as humans find ourselves in a really unique point in the history of humankind, when many of the challenges that we are facing now have never been faced before. So I'm thinking, first of all, longevity. Okay, so as a species, and as a group, we've never become that old as we do become, nowadays, which is of course great, which is great because we have a lot more time. But of course, the challenge, the flip side to it is that we've got to fund that long life, right? And that is, this is basic math. Who lives longer needs more money. So this is the first reason I think we speak about financial well-being. The second one is that we also live in times where the role of individuals and the role of the state is being redefined. So when you again take a step back, you would realize that the way we dealt with becoming older is that we created all sorts of government bodies. So we created, for example, the Department of Work and Pensions. Okay, so and these were bodies and institutions that were, of course, charged with redistributing wealth so as to help us sustain or lead somewhat stable longer lives. But increasingly, that notion of, the state is being there for you, that is being reworked, and much of the burden of long-term savings and long-term planning is being shifted on the shoulders of individuals. Okay, so I spoke here about the notion of the regime of the self, as Nicholas Rose, the professor of sociology at the London School of Economics, called it, right? So the regime of the self, this whole emphasis of autonomy and choice and self-responsibility, etc., all those things. And then lastly, I think what we are finding as well, for numerous reasons, in part because we are living longer, healthier lives, but in part also because of the pace of technological change, and perhaps also, as a result of more wealth in general, we are not living this 3-stage life anymore. This is a phrase coined by Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott, where, that's comprised of education, work, retirement, but rather we have multiple stage lives where we are having more than just one career. We have transition points in between, perhaps because we are forced out of a job, rise of AI or robots. Perhaps we are, burning out or losing interest or wanting to take care of our children or needing to take care of elderly relatives or something. So there's a number of reasons for why we are not just sticking with one career and one large and long stint in a working life, but rather it is many more careers with transition points in between. And again, that is a new thing and is a real poses both a financial and mental challenge. And those three things, longevity, the regime of the self, the multi-stage life, those three things are really quite unique. We never had that in the history of humankind before. And there's no precedence in both the culture and society and biology and evolution that would teach us how to cope with these things. It's really rather unique. And that is, I think, why we're speaking about financial well-being.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. Because I've read about before, because I wouldn't have even considered it necessarily before, but people say my parents' age, so like in their mid-50s to mid-60s, often now, because obviously the younger generations are often having to stay at home longer or rely on their parents much longer. Yes. Up into like their 30s, some people, or even 40s. Yes. So the parents are sort of still having to look after their grown-up children in a way at the same time as looking after their own elderly parents and being kind of squeezed in the middle, I think.
Exactly. Exactly. That is quite common. Exactly. So that was the first part of that presentation I gave at the Institute for Financial Wellbeing, really a reflection for why do we speak about financial wellbeing. Secondly, I was pondering what that means for advisors, because theoretically, that should really pave the way for financial planners, and especially for more holistic and relationship-focused financial planners, because a large share of the UK population would agree that retirement planning and long-term savings and life planning is much more complex now than it was 20, 30 years ago. So in theory, that should mean great, right? I'm a financial planner. This is exactly what I'm here for. We spoke about this before, that the future type of financial advisor is perhaps less a, performance and wealth maximizer type financial advisor, classic alpha. It's all about policy portfolio, performance of the policy portfolio versus benchmark portfolio, asset allocation costs, blah, blah, blah. It's not so much that is the value proposition of the financial advisor of the future. They're more like, life planners with a strong financial component. So that backdrop that I mentioned, that should really, in theory, pave the way for that type of financial advisor. But what we see, interestingly, is that in the younger generation, there is less of an appreciation for that type of value proposition. So they are, on the one hand, more likely to say that it's not just about wealth maximization, but we gave them in research we've done, we gave them a little like money allocation tasks or coin allocation tasks. And if you had 100 coins and you could choose to allocate the 100 coins to different variables of a financial advisor, what would you allocate the coins to? And what we found was that the younger generation was giving a surprisingly high share. I was surprised. I would have thought they would give fewer of those coins to the more hard-nosed aspects of financial advice, like, asset allocation, wealth maximization, less retirement planning. That makes sense, more like, transition planning, etc. But fewer of those hypothetical coins to, financial well-being, financial education, that more holistic and relationship-focused side of financial advice. And that made me ponder why that may be, and I then triangulated that with other data points that we that are publicly accessible, for example, from the London Stock Exchange or Barclays Bank have done some work, etc. That really made me think that actually it appears that the way the younger generation seem to be dealing with those challenges is by focusing or by targeting financial independence rather than financial well-being. Okay, so there's a bit of a belief that, this is now me interpreting findings or reading between the lines. Yeah, it's not that people said it as much, but as I say, it's an interpretation. So the younger generation, when I speak of the younger generation, I mean like under 45. So yeah. So they are realizing those challenges that I mentioned, and the fantasy. This is now a judgment. The fantasy is that all those challenges would be easily dealt with if only you were financially independent. Yeah. So, the challenges posed by AI, not wanting to do the job, wanting to spend more time with family or needing to take care of elderly relatives, etc. All those things, they really wouldn't be a challenge if only I was financially independent. Yeah. And I think you see this in statistics like, younger investors, millennials. I think they're most prevalent, the asset class they're most likely to invest in or have invested in first was Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. Okay, so more adventurous and less perhaps long-term focused types of asset classes, but really simply put, types of asset classes that hope for the quick big gains. Yeah. So it's about so that then in this second part really invited me to think about, or invited the attendees to think about what's the difference between financial well-being and financial independence, when I think it is different.
Yeah, exactly. No, that was interesting. I am a millennial myself. I totally get that. Before I joined money marketing, and I didn't really I suppose or I didn't appreciate the fact that, investments for the long term. And if you look at an investment graph over like 20 years or 30 years or whatever, it's always going to be going up. But I always thought if I was going to invest, I would want it to go up quickly, basically like trying to play the stock markets, which I was never very good at. So I can appreciate why people think like that.
Yes, and of course you're not the only one. I mean, to play the stock markets is a game that hardly ever works out in the long term, right? I mean, you can be lucky short term, and I mean, if you're a professional speed trader and you have I don't know, then perhaps there's something in it. But for the vast majority, for the 99.9%, it hardly ever works out. So, but yeah, exactly. So this is why, a more laid back approach, one that is more long-term thinking, perhaps one that is less, goal oriented, as in, financial goals, because this is a bit the fantasy, I suppose, behind financial independence, that there's the assumption that if only I have this amount, whatever that amount is, then, boom, all the problems I have, will be sorted. This is a fantasy on so many levels, I suppose. It's a fantasy because, I mean, first of all, what's that figure supposed to be when, all of a sudden all the worries are gone? Secondly, also, there's a lot of, behavioral and financial psychological research that would say, it's probably more likely that once you have a certain amount of wealth, you're much more likely to get into a hedonic treadmill, and you have all of a sudden you would develop other goals and objectives, etc. The other thing, I think, the other reason I believe it's a bit of a fantasy is because it's really kind of stuck in the 3-stage life model. That I think is a thing of the past, because in essence, the hope is that you can live a kind of life where that third stage of the old, 3-stage life model, retirement, is brought forward. Yeah, that's kind of the assumption behind financial independence. And this is why I believe it's a bit of a fantasy. It's, by the way, let me qualify. It's a bit of a fantasy for most of the time, right? I mean, so, at one point, of course, you do want to retire and you do want to slow down and you want to have the ability to do so. So, of course, at one point in your life, you will want to be more financially independent. I get that. Yeah. But for most of the time, I don't think for most of the lives we have, for the time we have, I don't think financial independence is the right goal. And that's why a more balanced, approach like financial well-being, where it's really more about, as I say, spending, earning, managing money in line with what makes you happy, in line with what makes you happy today, tomorrow, and beyond. That's the better approach.
And money doesn't necessarily make you happy, as you said. Like, what is the amount of? I imagine it would be different in everyone's head, but I always think, like, if I won £500,000 in the lottery or something, then that would just make my life so much easier. But then most people, they're probably then just gonna want to strive for more, and they're never going to be happy with what they've got, kind of thing.
Yes.
So no,
exactly.
I get it.
I mean, so let me again qualify this point with, more money doesn't make you happy. That is, I'm assuming you and, the listeners are not living below the poverty line, right?
No, exactly.
Because if you are living below the poverty line, then of course, an extra 10 grand can make a big difference.
Of course.
So exactly. So, but yeah, beyond.
But if you're sort of mid-affluent, or if you've got like enough to be comfortable already.
Yes, exactly. Beyond a certain point, it doesn't do much more. And we see, in fact, that we've done that research. That was in one of the first waves we've done in the financial well-being world, or the financial well-being research we've done, that what tends to happen is that those on even the highest incomes, the share of folk who say they worry about money isn't actually significantly lower compared to the lower income bands or wealth bands. They just worry about other things. Yeah. So perhaps they worry about, public school fees, or they worry about, mortgage, I don't know, higher mortgage rates, or I don't know. There's just different things. It's just different things they worry about. This is, in fact, one of the straplines we're using in the financial well-being research when we, speak to the general public, that it is normal to worry about money. Regardless of your wealth band and your income group and your objective financial status, it is normal to worry about money, but you can worry more insightfully and constructively. Yeah. And this is what we're trying to do, to help you worry more insightfully, learn from, envious moments, if you're feeling anxious about your future, what is in that concern, what is in that emotion of anxiety or guilt or whatever it is, because chances are there's something productive, there's a positive intent in the worry. But we've got to learn to deal with that. Yeah.
Just worrying isn't going to help, I suppose. It's how you act off the back of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. Exactly. Really interesting stuff. I did just want to ask more generally, I suppose, because I know you've obviously touched on it a bit as we've been talking, but more generally, how much of a role do you think financial advisors have in helping increase people's financial well-being? And I suppose what specifically can they do?
Yeah, so I believe financial advisors, financial planners play a big role, especially if they are, so I'm assuming they're not the sort of product focused and, transactional type financial advisors, when it's really about a type of financial advice that seeks to understand what role money plays in a successful long and happy life they're living, right? So if they are paying attention to the client's values and the client's centers, or however you want to call it, right? So we have different, a client can be family centered, they can be work centered, they can be, community centered, they can be, there's different things that matter to different clients. So
self-centered.
They can be self-centered, absolutely. They can be enemy-centered. They can be, there's so many different ways. There's so many different kinds of centers. So if an advisor works that out and then seeks to understand the role that that they can play as financial advisors to sort of help them live towards that center that is important. Of course, there will be a bit of goals and objectives, a bit of lifestyle related stuff. and helping clients achieve those lifestyle related goals, if an advisor is able to understand the deeper emotions that are driving them to seek financial advice in the first place, right? So, I mean, because there's plenty of different reasons for why. To save time, to offload unpleasantries, to reduce analysis paralysis, to, there's so many different emotional reasons, and, addressing these emotional reasons behind the financial advice for seeking financial advice, that I think that all these things are really important aspects of a financial advisor, when we know that, money is an important ingredient for a long and happy life. We also know that finances and money are one of the main reasons people are worried and anxious in their life. So to address those, as I say, it's quality of life related goals, that's emotional needs. It's more than just about the money. Of course, the money is important, but it is, those things that are clustering around that. So that type of financial advisor, I think, plays a huge, role, incredibly important, social responsibility, really.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to jump back to something you said earlier about, you said about millennials and how you were surprised that not more of them were wanting sort of more of the financial well-being and life planning stuff. And
Yes.
I wondered, like, what extent, or what's the extent to which you think that's also caused by people not realizing what financial planners can do and just maybe assuming that they're there to just help with your investments or help with your pension or whatever. And so do you think there's
absolutely.
like a role of more informing education about what financial advisors do that can help with that?
I think that plays a role. So, and to be fair, I mean, the advice industry has educated clients and prospective clients that what they're there for is this classic alpha type stuff. Yeah. So there will need to be a bit of a re-education and a bit of a repositioning need to be done in the advice industry. And we at Aegon would absolutely, support that. I think there's perhaps a more general instinct, and I can totally understand where that would be coming from. I spoke about that regime of the self, and we are valuing responsibility and autonomy and choice and all those things. These are values that we cherish really nowadays, and I suspect there is a bit of an instinct, perhaps in the younger generation, that I'm on my own and I've got to figure that out myself. Yeah. So I think this is perhaps a more general instinct in that generation that applies to all sorts of things. Yeah. Not just the financial side, but also, I don't know, education, perhaps, family life, different aspects of family life, perhaps, with regards to, finding a way in an increasingly complex way workplaces work, etc. I think there's a lot more expectation that I'm the one who's got to figure that out, and you can see where that's coming from. But I think that's perhaps also a reason why there's a hesitation to speak to financial advisors.
Yeah, I see. Not wanting to ask for directions. I'm guilty of that.
Exactly. I'm self-empowered. I'm an autonomous being. I can make I'm the master of my own destiny. That sort of assumption. When, I mean, you can see where it's coming from, but you can also see its flaws.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. We're probably approaching the end of our time, but I did just want to end by asking you, and again, you've kind of already covered it a little bit in when I asked you about the role financial advisors play in helping people's financial well-being. But is there like one big piece of advice or one main piece of advice that you'd have for financial advisors in helping their clients to improve financial well-being?
Yeah,
or it can be two. It doesn't have to be one. It can be two or three, but one.
I consolidate two thoughts in one. So this was on the back of the talk at the Institute for Financial Wellbeing's conference, that I think it was Chris Budd. He asked me, what is my favorite bias? So It's a funny question, right? What's my favorite bias? And I thought there's a lot to say in favor of present bias, which is kind of ironic, okay, because we spoke about the challenges of longevity and needing to save for the long term, etc. But of course, the fact is, we're not just living in the future; we're also living now. Yeah, and this is the strapline from Paul Dolan, Professor Paul Dolan, the behavioral scientist at the London School of Economics, who says happiness lost now is happiness lost forever. Yeah, so it's not just about deferred gratification. It's not just about saving for the future. It's also about, enjoying life now and today. So this was thought number one. Thought number two, and this is, I picked this up from Megan Lertz, who was on a podcast the other day, and she spoke about financial planners needing to weave into their financial plans a goal for the next 18 months. Okay, so a financial goal or a happiness-related goal for the next 18 months. And this is in part to address the point that I just made. It's not just about the long-term future, it's also about the present. But there was another aspect that she highlighted, and this is that by focusing a financial goal that, something that would make you happy, something that you would need to save towards, but something that would make you happy, then you actually learn to pay attention to the things that would make you happy, that might make you happy, right? When this is not something that we are very good at working out. I mean, this is the essence of behavioral science, right? That the essence of the work of Daniel Kahneman and Richard Thaler and Tversky, etc., that we are rather bad at evaluating our own well-being. Rather, what we do all the time we're referring to actually pointless reference points. Yeah. So be it, social proof or, present by, be it framing effects, that's kind of the point of behavioral science, where we're all the time using reference points. So we've got to learn to pay attention to the things that actually make us happy. So this is perhaps the piece of, how it consolidates in a recommendation for financial advisors to, when they have a client review meeting, to also, in that client review meeting, think with the client about what may be a goal, a financial goal, something that needs to be funded in the next 12 to 18 months. So as to, also address the fact that it's not just about the future, it's also about the present, and train the client to learn to pay attention to the things that make them happy.
Brilliant. I'm all for living in the present. So I suppose it's about getting the balance right, isn't it? Because you do need money for the future as well. But yeah, definitely.
Exactly. I mean, this is in fact why it's so complex, right? We're not just living now, we're also living in the future, or the other way around. We're not just living in the future, we're also living now, right? This is why it's so hard to get it right.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Tom. I really enjoyed our chat. Really interesting stuff.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation With. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all our new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as our print edition Money Marketing magazine. So make sure to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.